This year is going to be remembered as the year of climate catastrophe. Various parts of the world witnessed the wrath of Mother Nature. From the drought in the Horn of Africa to one-third of Pakistan being inundated by floods, and Europe facing one of its hottest summers in decades. And now the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, is putting its heads together to address the problem of climate change. This is the first time that the military alliance, founded in 1949, which sought to create a counterweight to the Soviet armies stationed in Central and Eastern Europe after World War II, is discussing climate change. NATO is a collective security system. Its independent member states agree to defend each other against attacks by third parties. And now the organization, which has 30 member countries, sat down with climate experts to discuss the impact of climate change on security. Among the issues discussed were the latest trends on climate change and security in the Euro-Atlantic region, the implications of climate change for NATO's future operating environment, and best practices from NATO allies and other international bodies with respect to climate adaptation and mitigation. Moreover, with the rise of global temperatures, the Arctic is also facing the consequences of climate change. Warmer temperatures are leading to the melting of glaciers, which in turn has exposed the world to the scare of a virus that is now becoming active as the ice melts away. Moreover, in that cold Arctic environment, the melting away of ice is not the only concern. Russia is also making deep forays there. Look at these visuals of the unveiling of two new nuclear icebreakers. One of them is nuclear-powered icebreaker Yakutia, which the Kremlin says is among the world's largest. The Ural and Yakutia are part of a fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers that are meant to ensure Moscow's dominance over the melting Arctic. While Russia makes its presence known to the Arctic, the roundtable talks come amid the constant increase of global temperatures that is forcing millions of people to migrate from their homes in search of food. One of the examples of this can be seen in the Horn of Africa. The region is experiencing one of its worst droughts in decades. This has resulted in millions of people suffering from malnutrition, and according to the UN, 500,000 children's lives are at stake from a looming famine in Somalia, which is more than anywhere else in the world. In addition to this, people migrating from their homes to different parts of the world in search of a better livelihood, there is another security threat that is looming over countries due to the climate crisis. Whenever a country faces a natural calamity of a large scale, like the floods in Pakistan that inundated almost one-third of the country and killed more than 1,700 people. And in case of a disaster like this, due to the limited resources that a nation has, the first responders to such situations are generally the military of that country, where they help in carrying out search and rescue operations, as well as help in providing relief fund to those regions which become inaccessible due to the natural calamity. And for more analysis, we are now being joined by retired General Tom Middendorp from the Netherlands. He is the chair of the International Military Council on Climate and Security. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
In your opinion, why is NATO holding a roundtable on climate change?
I think NATO is increasingly realizing that climate change is a determining factor in the future of security. I represent a wide global network of experts from more than 40 countries on this issue, and we have been pushing this for several years now. And it's good to see large security institutions now moving on this topic, because they have a responsibility here, and it will drastically affect the security environment around us. It will act as a risk multiplier in many regions in the world. And also the natural disasters will cause all kinds of humanitarian disasters.
Right. Can you also explain how climate change is linked to national security? Can you expand on the point that you just made?
Oh, yes. I think climate change is not a security matter as such. It's a much wider matter. But it is also a matter of national security, because it potentially has enormous security consequences. And it affects the security in many ways. First of all, strategically. There will be more and more competition and friction over access to scarce resources. And also water is becoming a scarce resource, but we see an increasing range of scarce resources, which will create more competition, and competition can result in friction and in conflicts. And history has shown many cases of that. We also see new geopolitical arenas opening up, like what you mentioned in the Arctic area, where the ice is melting away very rapidly, and in a few years there will be no Arctic anymore. And many countries like Russia, China, the US, Europe, they all claim access to the resources in that region, which is a potential area of conflict as well. But it also gives new economic opportunities with new trade routes opening up over the north. Secondly, it will affect us in more operational ways, because climate change, the increasing droughts, the floodings, take away a lot of the perspectives that local people have to sustain their families, which increases internal frictions in many countries.
Right, let's talk about Russia's activities in the region. It also gives us a sense of the politics of climate change, which could explain why NATO is holding a roundtable conversation around this topic. Tell us about that.
Well, the politics around, I think NATO is developing its role on this regard, and NATO can play many roles. NATO can play a role in helping to forecast the security effects of climate change on the intelligence side. NATO can play a role in helping mitigate the effects of climate change through new technologies. NATO can play a role in adaptation, helping countries in fragile and developing regions to become more resilient against climate change. Of course, that will be a limited role, because this is not a military problem and not a military subject, but they can help other institutions, civil institutions, to play a role in adaptation programs. And of course, as you mentioned, in disaster relief, NATO can play a role. We see an increasing number of severe weather incidents, and that requires international cooperation, also from a military side.
Right, just a final question there. Do you think that with national security being affected, will this push the wealthier Western countries towards allocating more resources towards climate action?
I think the security nexus helps to put climate change higher on the agenda. Because until now it was mostly seen as an environmental issue. And not many countries, not all countries were waiting for such a topic. But now it becomes also relevant from an economic perspective. It becomes also relevant from a security perspective. I think it will rise on the agenda internationally and create more impulses to join forces there and to support, especially the more developing countries in dealing with it. So I hope it will push countries towards more climate action, and the military can play several roles in that.
Right. Thank you so much for all your insights, and thanks for joining us on WION's Climate Tracker today. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.